Imagine yourself sitting in a waiting room. There is no phone in your hand, nothing to read, only a row of chairs, a water cooler that gurgles softly every few minutes, and a clock mounted on the wall that you have become quietly convinced is not working properly. You glance at it. 2:17. You look away, let your thoughts wander through a few different places, then look back. 2:18. One single minute has just passed, yet it felt, with all sincerity, like 11. Now, if you would kindly cast your memory back to the last time you were doing something you truly loved, playing a game that held your full attention, watching a series you simply could not bring yourself to pause, sharing a conversation with someone whose company you did not want to leave. You looked up, and 3 hours had quietly slipped away. 3 full hours, and you did not feel a single one of them depart. The same clock was on the wall. The same universe surrounded you. The same brain was in your head. Yet the experience of time was entirely, almost startlingly, different. Here is what makes this so fascinating. Your brain does not actually possess a clock, at least not the kind that measures seconds reliably and consistently, regardless of circumstance. What it has instead is something considerably more interesting. And those two contrasting experiences, the waiting room and the beloved activity, reveal almost everything about how it genuinely functions. Every moment of your life, your brain is quietly doing something it rarely gets credit for. It is actively collecting information without pause, sampling sounds, sensations, thoughts, and subtle changes around you, then carefully filing each one away. And here is what truly matters. Your brain uses the density of those memories to decide how long something actually took. When you are deeply engaged, your brain stops noticing smaller details. The hum of a room, the sensation of your chair, the distant traffic, all filtered away, never entering your memory. So when you look back on 3 hours doing something you love, your brain finds very little evidence that time passed. It concludes, that was brief. Now return to the waiting room. Bored and without meaningful work, your brain begins noticing everything. The gurgling water cooler, the ticking clock, the texture of the armrest. Every small observation enters your memory. So when you look back on 20 minutes of waiting, your brain counts all that evidence and concludes, that was a very long time. You did not experience more time. You simply collected more data. And data, it turns out, feels very much like time. In 2012, psychologists William Friedman and Mark Jansen at Oberlin College conducted a study on precisely this subject. Participants were asked to estimate time intervals while completing tasks of varying mental demands. The more attention a task required, the shorter participants believed it had lasted. The less attention it required, the longer. Not because their brains were operating at different speeds, but because attention determines what gets recorded. And what gets recorded is precisely what the brain later uses to measure how long something lasted. The researchers referred to this as the attentional gate model, which is a rather elegant way of saying that your brain essentially bills for time by the memory. There is, however, a second mechanism at work, and this one is perhaps even more remarkable. Your brain does not only measure time by looking backward, it also experiences time moving forward, in the present moment. And that version of time perception depends upon something entirely different. Dopamine. In the 1970s, neuroscientist Warren Meck at Princeton conducted a series of experiments with rats and their perception of time. By adjusting their dopamine levels, sometimes reducing it, sometimes increasing it, he observed meaningful changes in how accurately they judged time intervals. When dopamine was increased, the rats began to overestimate how much time had passed. When dopamine was decreased, They underestimated it. Dopamine, it became clear, was effectively setting the pace of an internal clock. More dopamine meant the clock ran faster, and everything felt longer in the moment. Less dopamine meant the clock slowed, and time seemed to compress. Consider what happens in your brain during boredom. Nothing particularly rewarding is occurring. There is no pleasant anticipation, no small wins arriving. Dopamine is low. Your internal clock ticks faster than real time, so each real second feels stretched, longer than it truly is. Now consider what happens when you are absorbed in something joyful. A game, a conversation, a story that has drawn you in completely. Dopamine is elevated. Your internal clock runs quietly in the background, and each real second passes before it has finished counting. Time feels swift. Gone before you noticed it beginning. Two separate mechanisms arriving at the same result. When you are bored, time feels slow because you are gathering too many small memories and because your dopamine-driven clock is ticking loudly. When you are absorbed, time feels fast because you are collecting very little and because your internal clock is running softly in the background. There is also a third and more extreme version of this experience. People who have lived through genuinely frightening moments. Soldiers, accident survivors, athletes in moments of extraordinary pressure often report something remarkable afterward. Time appeared to stop entirely. Not slow, but stop. This is because when the brain perceives a genuine threat, it floods the system with attention, capturing every available piece of sensory information with unusual precision, encoding far more per second than it normally would. Neuroscientist David Eagleman at Stanford tested this directly in 2007, asking volunteers to read numbers on a specially designed watch while experiencing a controlled freefall from a significant height. If time truly slowed during fear, they should have been able to read digits that normally moved too quickly to register. They could not. What Eagleman discovered was that time does not actually slow in those moments. What changes is the resolution of the recording, the richness of the memory created. When that memory is later replayed, there is simply so much more material than usual that it feels as though it must have taken much longer. The slowdown, fascinating as it is, belongs to the archive rather than to the moment itself. This brings us to the part worth sitting with thoughtfully. If your subjective sense of how long you have lived depends upon how much you remember, and if you remember more when things are genuinely new, surprising, or emotionally meaningful, then a life built largely on routine is a life that will feel, in honest reflection, rather brief. Think about being 7 years old. Nearly everything was unfamiliar. Every summer felt as though it spanned years. Every approaching holiday seemed to take an eternity to arrive. Your brain had no existing templates for most experiences, so it saved nearly everything. Every moment became a data point. Now consider last year. Can you fully account for it? Much of it may feel blurred. The weeks that resembled the weeks before them. The familiar routines. The mornings and evenings that left little behind in memory. Because little that was truly new occurred. You did not run out of time. You ran out of novelty. In 1890, the remarkable William James, widely regarded as the father of American psychology, wrote something in his Principles of Psychology that has never quite been improved upon. He observed that in youth, one may have an absolutely new experience nearly every hour, while in later life, those same hours become filled with repetition. In youth, time feels crowded and full. In age, it feels bare and swift. He wrote this without the benefit of neuroscience, without dopamine research, without modern imaging technology. He simply observed people, carefully and honestly, and arrived at something true. Your brain measures time in memories. The more you create, the longer life feels. The more you allow to blur past in comfortable, familiar sameness, the faster it goes. Not because time itself changes, but because your brain determines how long something lasted based entirely on what it chose to keep. You still carry that same brain. The same mechanism is quietly at work this very moment. It is still perfectly capable of being surprised, of noticing something new, of saving what it encounters. The only question worth asking is whether you are giving it anything truly worth keeping. What all of this really means is simple. Your brain does not measure life in hours or minutes. It measures life in memories. When days become repetitive, time begins to disappear. But when something is new, meaningful, or emotionally real, your brain holds onto it, and life feels fuller, richer, and strangely longer. That is why childhood felt endless. Everything was new. Every moment mattered enough to remember. You did not run out of time. You ran out of novelty. And maybe that is the real challenge of growing older. Not finding more time, but giving your brain more moments worth keeping. Because in the end, the life that feels longest is not the one that lasted the most years. It is the one remembered the most.